Rain fell hard against the glass of my apartment windows in Austin that night. The kind of rain that makes the world sound smaller, like everything outside is being erased. I was still at my desk, fingers tapping code into the dim blue light of my laptop. The hum of the ceiling fan mixed with the steady tick of the clock on the wall. For a moment, everything was still until a heavy knock slammed through the door like a gunshot. My breath caught. Then came another, and another. Claire. Open this damn door. The voice was thick with whiskey. My brother. Dylan. I froze. He was supposed to be staying at Mom's house, not here. I looked at the time. 11:47 p.m. He hadn't called, hadn't texted. My hand hovered over the keyboard as if it could save me. You think you can ignore me? His voice grew sharper, closer. The metal handle rattled. My body reacted before my mind did. I unplugged the laptop, stood, and reached for my phone, but the next sound made me drop it. The crash of glass. He had broken the small window by the door and reached in to unlock it. "Dylan, stop!" I shouted. The door swung open with a violent gust of wind and rain. He stumbled inside, soaked, reeking of alcohol and gasoline. His face was red, his eyes unfocused, but behind them burned something I recognized too well. Rage. "You think you're better than me now," he snarled. I stepped back, heart hammering against my ribs. "You need to leave. Right now. Leave." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You've been running your whole damn life. From Dad, from Mom, from me." I tried to stay calm, but my hands shook. "Dylan, please." "You're drunk." "No. I'm awake." He grabbed a half-empty bottle from his coat pocket and took another swig before throwing it. The bottle shattered against the wall shards of glass, spraying across the room. One piece sliced my arm. The smell of bourbon and rain filled the air. I backed away toward the kitchen, slipping slightly on the wet floor. He kicked over a chair, sending it crashing into the counter. "You took the insurance money, didn't you?" he shouted. "It was for both of us. You think you can just walk away?" "I didn't take anything." I cried. "Dad left it in my name. You know that." "You lied." His voice broke into a growl, and before I could reach the door, he lunged. His hand grabbed my hair, jerking me backward. I screamed. He slammed me into the wall hard enough to make the frame of my college photo crash to the floor. My head rang, my vision blurred. I pushed against his chest, but he was stronger. "Dylan, stop!" I gasped, my voice cracking. He didn't hear me. He was somewhere else, trapped in whatever version of our past he had rewritten to justify this moment. He shoved me again, then again, until I hit the corner of the table. Pain shot through my ribs. I scrambled to grab anything to defend myself, a coffee mug, a lamp, but he swatted them away like toys. The lamp shattered. Sparks flashed. The room flickered with orange light. "Why do you always run from me?" he yelled. "I'm your brother." He lifted his arm. I saw the blur before I felt the impact. His fist met my face, hot and sudden like an explosion of white. I tasted blood. I staggered backward, slipping on glass. My laptop crashed to the floor, the screen still glowing with lines of unfinished code. "Dylan," another voice screamed. It was Mom. She was at the top of the stairs wearing her nightgown, eyes wide with terror. "Please stop." But she didn't move. She just stood there frozen, her hand gripping the banister so tight her knuckles went white. "Mom, help me," I cried, but my words barely made it out between gasps. Dylan turned toward her, breathing hard. "Go back upstairs, Mom," he said, his tone low, dangerous. She didn't. She couldn't. He turned back to me and grabbed the front of my shirt, slamming me against the wall again. My head hit plaster. The sound echoed in my ears. I felt something warm trickle down the side of my neck. My own blood. He pinned me there, his hand closing around my throat. My lungs clawed for air. His breath was hot sour, filled with anger and liquor. "You ruined everything," he hissed. "You always ruin everything." I clawed at his wrist nails, scraping skin, but it only made him squeeze harder. My vision narrowed to a tunnel of light and color. I could see the rain still hitting the window, the thunder flashing my mother's face halfway down the stairs, her mouth open but no words coming out. I thought, this is it. This is how I die. Then something cracked, the sound of the mirror breaking behind me, or maybe the sound of my own heartbeat giving up. My knees buckled. The world started to tilt. For a moment, Dylan's face looked almost human again, as if he realized what he was doing. But then it was gone. Everything went cold. My body hit the floor with a dull thud. I tried to reach for my phone, but my hand wouldn't move. My last thought was of Mom's scream's sharp trembling, caught halfway between terror and love. The rain kept falling. Then everything went dark. The first thing I felt was cold. Cold on my skin, cold in my throat, cold pressing against my ribs like someone had carved the warmth out of me. Then came sound. A steady beeping, soft voices, a machine exhaling air in slow intervals. I opened my eyes and the world was white. Blinding, sterile white. The hospital ceiling blurred in and out, fluorescent lights burning through the haze in my head. I tried to move, but a sharp pain ran from my neck to my shoulder. My body felt disconnected, like I was only borrowing it. A figure moved beside me. Mom! Her hair was messy, streaked with gray, her eyes sunken like she hadn't slept in days. Claire, she whispered, brushing my forehead with trembling fingers. You're okay. You're safe now. Her words felt soft, but her voice didn't. It carried fear, thick and trembling. I tried to speak, but my lips were dry. What happened? I managed. She looked down at her hands, avoiding my eyes. You fell, sweetheart. You slipped. What? My chest ached when I tried to sit up. No! Dylan. A sharp knock interrupted. A doctor entered, clipboard in hand, calm but cautious. Her badge read Dr. L. Price. Her eyes were observant kind, but sharp enough to cut through lies. Good morning, Ms. Benton. You've been unconscious for almost 12 hours. You suffered a concussion, a cracked rib, and some bruising around your neck. Do you remember what caused the injuries? I blinked at her. My heart pounded. I looked at Mom. She shook her head almost imperceptibly. She fell, Mom said quickly. She's been under a lot of stress lately. Dr. Price didn't write anything down. She just watched me, her eyes steady. Claire, can you confirm that? My throat tightened. I looked at Mom again. Her hand gripped the edge of the blanket so tightly that her knuckles turned pale. Her eyes pleaded with me, not with anger, but with terror. I saw it clearly now. Her lips were pressed thin, her body hunched like someone bracing for an invisible blow. I wanted to tell the truth, to scream it, but her hand reached for mine, squeezing hard, shaking. It's okay, she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. It's over now. The doctor waited, patient but unconvinced. I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock, the rhythmic pulse of the heart monitor syncing with my breath. My mind replayed the night before Dylan's face, the sound of glass shattering, Mom frozen on the stairs. My voice trembled. I fell. The words came out small, hollow. Dr. Price nodded slowly, but her eyes didn't move away from me. All right, she said quietly. I'll note that. But if you remember anything else, anything at all, you can tell me. Any time. She turned to my mother. She'll need rest and observation for a few days. We'll keep her overnight. Mom nodded, thanking her, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. When the door closed, I turned my head toward her. Why, I whispered. She pressed her palms to her face and sobbed. I can't, she said between gasps. If you say it, if anyone hears it, he'll come back. You don't understand, Claire. He'll kill you. Her words sank into me like stones. He already almost did, I said. You saw it. She shook her head violently. You don't know him when he's like that. He's not my boy when he drinks. He's something else. Then why protect him, I demanded, but my voice cracked weak. I'm not, she whispered. I'm protecting you. I stared at her, disbelief crawling up my spine. By lying. By keeping him calm, she said, looking at me through tears. If the police come, if they take him, he'll find a way back. And he'll come for you first. Her voice broke. Please, Claire, just let it go. We can leave. We can go somewhere new. I wanted to scream, but the pain in my chest kept me still. I could see how deep her fear ran, how Dylan's control didn't end with his fists. It was in her mind, her silence, the way she looked at doors as if he might walk through any second. She wasn't lying to protect him. She was surviving him. Outside the window, rain still tapped the glass. A nurse came in briefly checking my vitals, then left with a soft smile. The room went quiet again. I looked toward the hallway. Through the small window in the door, I saw him. Dylan, standing there. His eyes met mine for only a second, but that second burned. He smiled a slow, cruel, knowing smile and then turned away. I couldn't breathe. "He's here," I whispered. Mom's face went white. "Don't look at him," she said quickly. "He can't get in." "They won't let him." But her voice trembled. She didn't believe it either. I sank back into the pillow, shaking. My mind raced. I had to leave. I had to find a way to get away from both of them. But the IV in my arm anchored me, and the weight of my body kept me pinned. The clock ticked louder. My mother sat back down, hands folded tightly in her lap. She tried to pray, but no words came out. Just a low hum of grief and guilt. I turned my head away, tears running down my temples into the pillow. Every breath hurt. Every sound of footsteps in the hall made me flinch. Hours passed like minutes. The nurse dimmed the lights, the room fading into gray. My mother stayed watching the door like it was both a shield and a threat. When I finally spoke again, it was barely a whisper. I fell. I repeated as if saying it out loud could make it true, could make the nightmare smaller. But deep down, I knew it was a lie, big enough to swallow us both. The monitor beeped steadily, indifferent. Mom brushed my hair back and kissed my forehead. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." When I close my eyes, I still see the old house on Willow Creek Road, the one with the white porch swing that never stopped squeaking even after Dad tried to oil it 100 times. Back then, Dylan was my hero. He was 4 years older, stronger, funnier, the kind of brother who stood between me and every bad thing the world could offer. When I was 10 and a group of kids threw mud at my bike, he made them apologize. When I fell off the swing and scraped my knee, he carried me inside and told me I was tougher than most grown men. We were a team back then. Mom would sit on the porch and watch us, her smile soft, a glass of lemonade in her hand, the sun dipping low behind the pecan trees. Life was simple, loud, and full of laughter. Then Dad's accident happened. It was a Tuesday morning, gray and humid, the kind that makes your shirt cling to your back. He was working at the refinery outside Austin, same as always when a pressure valve burst. One wrong seal, one bad weld, and he was gone. Just like that. I was 16. Dylan was 20. The world cracked in half. Mom stopped talking much after that. She moved slower, cooked less, stared at empty spaces longer. I remember the first week after the funeral, Dylan didn't let her drive. He took her car keys, said he'd handle everything. "I'm the man of the house now," he told me with a pride that felt too sharp. I thought it was love, a son trying to protect his grieving mother. I didn't see how the word protect could turn into something like possession. The insurance money came later. Dad had a small policy, nothing huge but enough to cover college for one of us. His will left it in my name because I was still a minor. Dylan didn't say much then, but the silence had teeth. He joined the police academy a few months later. I remember how proud Mom was when he graduated. She framed his photo him in the blue uniform, clean-shaven, standing tall. "Your brother keeps us safe," she said every time someone came over. And for a while he did. He worked long hours, barely slept, called every night to check if the doors were locked. But something in him started to harden. He stopped laughing the way he used to. When I came home from my first semester of college, I noticed the bottles cheap whiskey mostly lined up behind the cereal boxes. I asked him about it once. "Don't you worry about me," he said, smiling without warmth. "You just make sure you don't forget where you come from." I didn't understand what that meant until years later. After Dad's death, Mom clung to Dylan. He was her link to what was left of family, the one who fixed the roof, who mowed the lawn, who drove her to church even when she didn't want to go. She called him her anchor. I didn't realize that anchors can drown you if you hold on too long. When he left the force after an altercation with another officer, Mom said it was because the job was too stressful. But one night, I found a folded letter in the kitchen drawer, his resignation. Aggressive conduct unbecoming an officer. He had punched his superior. When I asked him, he said, "That man disrespected me." He said it like it explained everything. He said it like it was an answer carved into stone. I stopped pushing after that. I focused on finishing school, got my degree in computer engineering, and landed a job at a cybersecurity firm in Austin. It was the first time I'd lived alone, and for a while, freedom tasted like coffee at 2 a.m. And silence that didn't scare me. I called Mom every weekend, drove down every few months. Dylan rarely answered my calls. When he did, his voice always carried that same edge. "Don't forget who helped you get there," he'd say. I never knew what he meant. Then Mom started asking for me to come home more often. "He's been different," she said softly, "since he left the force. He drinks too much. He gets angry fast. I think he misses you." I told her I couldn't come not right away. "He's your brother," she whispered. "He loves you." I wanted to believe that, but every time I did, a memory would surface: the look in his eyes the night Dad died, the way his hands trembled when he held the folded flag they gave Mom. It wasn't grief. It was something heavier. When I finally visited again, the house felt smaller. The walls smelled like smoke and old wood. Dylan's patrol badge still hung by the front door, but the shine had faded. He had grown broader, his beard darker, his temper shorter. He hugged me tight, almost too tight, then joked, "You've been living the city life too long. Don't forget you're still a Benton." I laughed, but it didn't sound right. That night, I overheard him arguing with Mom in the kitchen. His voice was sharp, hers cracked with fear. "You give her too much freedom," he said. "She doesn't call enough. She doesn't visit enough. You let her disrespect me. She's working." "Dylan," Mom said softly. "She's trying to build a life." "Without us," he shouted. The sound of breaking glass followed. I stood at the top of the stairs, frozen. Mom saw me and shook her head. "Go back to bed," she mouthed. I did, and I hated myself for it. Years went by like that. Me pretending things were normal, him pretending he was still in control. Mom trapped somewhere in between. Then came the message that started it all. It was a voicemail from Mom. "He's not doing well, honey. Can you come home for a bit? Just for a week?" Her voice was trembling. I told her I'd try. I told myself it was just a visit. I didn't know I was walking back into a house where love had turned into fear, where silence had grown teeth. I used to think Dylan built walls around me to protect me. Now I know those walls were never meant to keep danger out. They were meant to keep me in. The drive back to my hometown was quieter than I remembered. The highway stretched for miles under a washed-out sky, the clouds hanging low like they were trying to touch the road. My hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly. It had been almost 8 months since I'd last seen Mom, and the guilt of that distance pressed down harder with every mile. The closer I got to Willow Creek Road, the more my chest tightened. The house came into view around the curve, smaller than I remembered, its white paint now chipped and faded. The porch swing was gone. So were the flower pots Mom used to keep by the steps. The yard looked unkept wild. I parked, sat for a moment, and took a breath before stepping out. The air smelled of rain and rust. Mom opened the door before I even knocked. Her hair had thinned, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. "Claire," she said, smiling through it all. "You came." She hugged me tightly, longer than usual, as if afraid I might vanish. Inside, the house felt colder. The curtains were half drawn, and a camera blinked red from the corner near the living room ceiling. "When did you get that?" I asked, pointing. "Oh, Dylan put them in," she said, brushing it off. "He says it makes him feel safer." Safer from what I asked, but she didn't answer. Her hands busied themselves with the kettle, her back to me. "He'll be happy you're here," she said. "He's been better." I didn't believe her. I could see it in the way her shoulders tensed when she said his name. When Dylan finally came home, it was nearly dark. I heard his truck before I saw it, the low growl of the engine, the slam of the door. My pulse jumped. The front door opened, and there he was, broader than before. His beard, unkempt, eyes sharp but unreadable. "Look who decided to come home," he said, a grin cutting across his face. I forced a smile. "Hey, Dylan." He stepped closer, too close, and looked me over like I was a stranger. City life treating you well? He asked. You look thinner. Work's been busy, I said. Mom said you weren't feeling great, so I thought. You thought what? His voice hardened slightly. That you'd come fix me. No, I said quickly. Just to visit. He laughed low and dry. Sure, a visit. He patted my shoulder friendly on the surface, but the weight of it lingered. We're family. We take care of each other. Dinner that night was quiet except for the sound of silverware and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Mom asked about my job, my apartment, my coworkers. Dylan watched me the whole time, his eyes following every movement like a hawk tracking a mouse. When I mentioned the new security project I was leading, he leaned back, smirking. Cybersecurity, right? So you spend your days telling other people how to stay safe while you run off from your own family. His words hit hard, but I kept my voice steady. That's not fair. Life's not fair, he said, chewing slowly. Mom's fork clinked against her plate. Dylan, please, she said softly. Not tonight. He didn't look at her. I'm just talking. After dinner, I offered to do the dishes. Mom helped drying plates with shaky hands. Dylan stood by the door watching. No need to clean up so fast, he said. We're not going anywhere. I looked at him. Do you always watch people wash dishes only when they act like they're in a hurry to leave? He said. The tone in his voice made my stomach turn. That night, I lay awake in my old room. The wallpaper had started to peel, and the air smelled faintly of mildew. I could hear footsteps creaking down the hall every hour or so. Slow, heavy, deliberate. At first, I thought it was Mom, but the weight was wrong. Dylan's weight. I stayed still, breathing quietly until the sound faded. In the morning, he was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee, the newspaper spread out in front of him. Morning, I said cautiously. Sleep okay? He asked, not looking up. Fine, I lied. He smiled without humor. Good. You shouldn't stay up late. People who stay up late think too much. The kettle hissed behind me. Mom came in pale and quiet. She poured coffee, hands trembling just slightly. He was checking the windows again last night, she said softly. Dylan looked up sharply. I told you it's for safety. From who I asked again. He glared. You think I'm paranoid? I think you're scared, I said before I could stop myself. His jaw clenched. He stood, leaned over the table. You don't know what I am. Mom's voice broke through. Please, she said, setting her cup down. Both of you. Not now. He turned away, but the silence he left behind felt like a loaded gun sitting on the counter. The next few days blurred together. Dylan stayed home more often, hovering in doorways, turning the TV up too loud, following conversations that weren't his. Every time my phone rang, he asked who it was. Every time I stepped outside, I could feel his eyes on me. Once I came back from a short walk and found my laptop moved an inch to the left on my desk. When I opened it, the battery was dead, though I'd left it charging. A week passed and I realized I hadn't left the house once without his permission. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe he was just trying to reconnect, trying to be a brother again. But late one night, I woke to the sound of keys turning in my door. Not the front door, my door. My bedroom. It opened halfway before I said his name. Dylan's silence. The door closed again, slow and deliberate. The next morning, I confronted Mom. He's been in my room, I said. I know it. She didn't deny it. Her eyes welled up. He just worries, she said. He checks the locks every night. Mom, that's not normal. I know, she whispered, voice trembling. But don't make him angry, please. He listens to you more than he listens to me. Her words crushed me. I wanted to shake her, to tell her to leave with me right then. But fear lived in every corner of that house. It was in the way she looked at the stairs before walking up them, in the way she kept her shoes by the door, like she might need to run at any moment. That night, Dylan made dinner again, steak overcooked and dry. You're staying a while, right? He asked, eyes fixed on me. We've missed you. I have to get back soon, I said carefully. There's a project deadline next week. He set his fork down slowly. You just got here. I know, but... No buts, he interrupted. Your family. You belong here. The way he said belong made my skin crawl. I nodded, forcing a smile. Just a few more days, I said. Then we'll see. His grin widened, satisfied. Mom looked down at her plate. I didn't eat much that night. When I finally went to bed, I locked the door and pushed a chair under the handle. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, realizing for the first time that I wasn't visiting anymore. I was trapped. My mother didn't protect him. She was surviving him too. The next morning started with silence, the kind that doesn't feel peaceful but heavy like a weight pressing down on the walls. I found Mom sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. She looked up at me and tried to smile. "He's still asleep," she whispered as if the house itself could hear her. I poured myself some coffee and sat across from her. "We can't keep doing this," I said quietly. "We need to go, Mom." She shook her head, eyes darting toward the hallway. "You don't understand. He'd follow us. He always finds us." Her voice cracked. "Last year I tried to visit Aunt Rose without telling him. He showed up there the next morning." "That's not normal," I said, my heart pounding. "That's obsession." She didn't reply. Her hand trembled as she lifted the mug to her lips. I reached across the table and took it gently from her. "Mom, please. Let's leave while he's asleep." Before she could answer, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. Dylan entered, yawning, stretching like nothing was wrong. "Morning, ladies," he said cheerfully, pouring himself coffee. He noticed our faces and smirked. "What, you two look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile. "We were just talking about errands." "Errands," he repeated, leaning against the counter. "What errands?" His tone was casual, but his eyes weren't. They were calculating sharp. "Groceries," I said quickly. "We're low on food." "I already went yesterday," he said, sipping his coffee. "We're fine." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You know what's funny? You act like this is your house." I didn't respond. He set his mug down harder than necessary. "I pay the bills. I fix the roof. I take care of Mom. What do you do, Claire? You just show up when you feel guilty." "That's not fair," I said quietly. His smile vanished. "Fair." He laughed once sharp. "You think life's fair? You think running off to your fancy job makes you better than us." "I never said that," I said, my voice trembling despite myself. "You don't have to." He stepped closer, the air thickening between us. Mom stood abruptly. "Dylan, please not now. Stay out of it, Mom." He snapped eyes, never leaving mine. "I'm just talking to my sister." He reached into his pocket and pulled out my phone. "Looking for this?" My stomach dropped. "Where did you get that? You left it charging in the living room." "I noticed you had a few missed calls. From work. From someone named Michael." "Who's that?" "My boss," I said, trying to stay calm. "We're on a deadline." "So that's why you're so eager to leave." His voice rose. "Because of work. Because I have a life." I said before I could stop myself. His hand twitched. For a moment, the room went utterly still. Mom whispered, "Dylan, please." He turned on her. "You always take her side." The next sound was a crash. The coffee mug flew from his hand and shattered against the wall. I flinched as hot liquid splattered my arm. "You think you can talk to me like that in my house?" he shouted. "Dylan," Mom screamed, stepping between us. He shoved her aside without even looking. She stumbled, catching herself on the counter. Something inside me snapped. "Don't touch her!" I shouted, pushing him back. The world slowed for half a second. His expression shifted from anger to disbelief, then to something darker. He raised his hand. The first slap came fast, hard across my cheek. The sound echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. My head whipped to the side and I tasted blood. "Dylan, stop!" Mom screamed again, grabbing his arm. He pushed her away harder this time. "You stay out of this," he roared. I staggered back, my face burning. My breath came in short, shallow bursts. "You hit me," I whispered. "You actually hit me. You think you can talk back to me," he said, his voice shaking with fury. "You think you can disrespect me in my own house?" I backed toward the table, my hand gripping the edge for balance. "You need help," I said softly. "You're sick." His eyes went wide, the veins in his neck bulging. "Don't you ever say that to me." He grabbed the edge of the table and flipped it, dishes clattering to the floor. Mom cried out, covering her head as shards of porcelain scattered across the tile. "Please, Dylan, stop! You'll kill her!" He froze for a moment, chest heaving, fists clenched. The sound of his ragged breathing filled the room. Then slowly he stepped back. "Look what you made me do," he said quietly. "You always push until I lose control." I pressed a napkin against my bleeding lip, my vision spinning. "That's not control," I said. "That's abuse." He sneered. "Big words from little sister." He turned to leave, but stopped in the doorway. "Don't think about calling anyone. I'll know." Then he was gone, the screen door slamming behind him. The silence that followed was unbearable. Mom knelt on the floor, picking up pieces of broken plate with shaking hands. "Don't," I said, kneeling beside her. "You'll cut yourself." "It's okay," she whispered. "He didn't mean it. He just gets angry sometimes." "Mom," I said, my voice breaking. "That's not anger. That's violence." She didn't respond. Her hands kept moving one shard at a time, as if cleaning up the mess could erase what had just happened. I wanted to grab her shoulders and shake her, make her see, but the look in her eyes stopped me. It wasn't denial. It was fear. Deep bone, deep fear. She wasn't defending him. She was surviving him. That night, I locked my bedroom door and sat on the floor, knees to my chest. The house was quiet again, but every creak in the floorboards made me flinch. I stared at my reflection in the dark window, the bruise already blooming on my cheek. I pressed my hand against it, whispering to myself, "You have to get out." From somewhere down the hall, I heard Mom's voice, soft, broken. "Don't make him angry again," she whispered, as if it were both a warning and a prayer. I closed my eyes and let the tears fall silently. I understood now. My mother wasn't my shield anymore. She was another prisoner in the same house. The days that followed bled together like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. Time lost shape inside that house. Morning, afternoon, night, it didn't matter. The air was heavy still, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Dylan had tightened his grip on everything. He started with the doors. Every lock was replaced, every window sealed with new screws that glinted in the morning light. When I asked why, he said, "Can't be too careful. People break in all the time." "We live in the middle of nowhere," I said. "Exactly," he replied with a smile that wasn't really a smile. Then came the keys. I noticed the key ring on his belt had grown heavier. I didn't even realize what had changed until I reached for the back door one morning and it wouldn't open. "Where are the spare keys?" I asked Mom. She looked at me with tired eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "He keeps them." "Why?" "He says it's safer that way." Safer for who I thought. The front door was always locked now, even during the day. If I needed air, I had to ask him. "You want to go outside?" he'd ask, smirking. "Sure, I'll come with you." He'd stand on the porch watching me like a guard. After a few days, I stopped asking. The cameras were everywhere now, one in the living room, one in the hallway, one facing the kitchen. Red lights blinked faintly, recording every movement. He said it was for security, but it felt more like a warning. "I see you. I hear you. You can't hide." Mom tried to make things normal. She baked sometimes, though the flour spilled more often than not because her hands shook so much. She hummed old hymns while folding laundry, but her voice trembled. Every time Dylan spoke, she flinched before he even raised his voice. I began to realize she wasn't just afraid of him hurting her. She was afraid of what he'd become. Afraid that if she said the wrong thing, the last thread of the man she'd raised would snap. He controlled everything, the mail, the bank cards, the car. He even switched out Mom's phone, saying hers wasn't safe anymore. She never got another one. Mine disappeared 2 days later. "You don't need it," he said simply when I asked. "Family should talk face to face." I wanted to fight back, but fear has a way of shrinking people. It starts with your voice, then your posture, then your thoughts. Every time I considered running, I'd imagine his truck behind me, his hands on my throat, his voice in my ear. I began to doubt myself the way victims always do. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it would get better if I just stayed quiet. One evening after dinner, he turned the TV up loud and started pacing the living room. "The world's gone soft," he muttered. "Everyone thinks rules don't apply to them anymore." Mom sat on the couch, silent. I watched her knuckles tighten around the hem of her sweater. "You're quiet tonight," he said to her suddenly. "Something wrong?" "No," she said quickly. "Just tired." "Tired of what?" His tone sharpened. "Of me." "No, Dylan," she said, forcing a smile. "Never you." I hated hearing her say that. I hated what fear had turned her into. That night, I waited until the house was dark. I crept into my room, closed the door, and opened my laptop. The blue light glowed softly against the walls. I created a new folder and started writing everything down, dates, times, incidents. I hid the file deep in the system encrypted under the name Project Notes. Every entry ended with one word: freedom, 2024. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but having it made me feel less powerless. 2 days later, I caught Mom standing at my doorway. She looked pale, her eyes darting to the hallway. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Just work," I said, quickly closing the screen. She hesitated, then slipped something onto my desk. A folded note. When I opened it later, it read, "If you ever run, don't look back. I'll be fine." My throat closed. I stared at the words for a long time, wondering how long she'd been planning to let me go. The next morning, Dylan announced that the car was broken. "Transmission's acting up," he said. "Can't be driven for a while." I knew that was a lie. The engine was fine the day before. He wanted us trapped, and we were. Days turned into weeks. He stopped going out altogether, saying the world outside wasn't safe anymore. He talked about conspiracies, about people trying to take what was his. I'd wake up to find him sitting in the dark living room, gun in his lap, staring at the window. "You can't be too careful," he'd say when he caught me watching. One night, I heard him arguing with himself in the kitchen. His voice rose and fell, anger melting into tears. I wanted to record it, but I didn't dare move. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened. Mom's silence deepened. She spoke only when he spoke first. When she cooked, she left his plate near the stove and waited until he was done eating before sitting down herself. I tried to talk to her once when he was gone for groceries. "Mom, we have to go. We can call the police." "No," she said sharply, almost panicked. "You don't understand. He'll find us. He always finds us." "Then we'll hide," I said. "We'll go far." She shook her head. "He has friends. He knows people from the force. We won't make it." Her voice cracked. "Please, Claire, don't make him worse." I wanted to scream that it couldn't get worse, but her eyes stopped me. She truly believed what she said. She was living in a nightmare where escape was just another way to die. That night, Dylan came home angry. The store had been out of something he wanted, and somehow that was our fault. He threw a bag of groceries onto the counter, the cans rolling out. "Nothing works anymore," he said, slamming a fist into the wall. "This world's full of idiots." Mom tried to calm him, placing a hand on his arm. He jerked away, shouting, "Don't touch me!" She stumbled back, eyes wide. I stepped forward. "That's enough," I said. "You need to stop treating her like this." His head snapped toward me. "You don't tell me what to do." "She's your mother," I said. "She's scared of you." He took a step closer, smiling now cold and deliberate. "And what about you, little sister? Are you scared of me?" I didn't answer. My heart raced, but I kept my face still. He stared at me for a long moment, then laughed. "That's what I thought." He walked away, muttering under his breath. When the door slammed, Mom collapsed into a chair, her shoulders shaking. I went to her, placing a hand on her back. She whispered, "He wasn't always like this." "I know," I said softly. "But he is now." I started planning again that night. I couldn't tell Mom yet, not until I had something real. I began hiding small things, cash from the grocery change, a spare key I found in the shed, a portable drive with my notes. I stored them in a hollow vent behind my dresser. Every morning I'd wake up to the same routine, Dylan checking locks, cameras, blinking, Mom walking on eggshells, and me pretending to be fine. It was like living inside a loop that never ended. One afternoon, I stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes when I saw movement outside the window. A woman was in her yard next door watering flowers. She looked up, caught my gaze, and smiled. She waved. It was Mrs. Hayes, the neighbor I remembered from childhood. I hadn't seen her in years. The sight of her made something inside me crack open. Hope. Real, dangerous hope. I waved back, quick and small, before the curtain moved behind me. Dylan's voice came from the doorway. "Who are you waving at?" "Just the neighbor," I said quickly. "She used to know Mom." He stepped closer to the window, peering through the glass. "She's nosy," he said. "Don't talk to her. She's harmless." "You don't know people," he snapped. "You never did." He pulled the curtain shut and left the room. I turned back to the sink, my hands trembling, heart pounding. Outside, through the thin slit of the curtain, I saw Mrs. Hayes still standing there, her face thoughtful. She lifted her hand again slower this time, 3 gentle knocks against the fence. A signal. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I knew it was a lifeline. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop again. I wrote the words, "He can lock the doors. He can watch every move, but he can't own my mind." Then I saved it under Freedom 2024 and closed the lid. The cage was closing, but I wasn't done fighting. Mrs. Hayes became the only reminder that the world outside still existed. I started noticing her more often through the kitchen window, watering her hydrangeas, feeding stray cats, hanging clothes to dry. She moved slowly, deliberately, like someone who had learned that peace was a fragile thing. One morning, while Dylan was out running errands, I stood by the fence, pretending to sweep the porch. She was there again, wearing a faded blue dress and a wide sun hat. "Morning, honey," she called softly. Her voice was warm, like sunlight slipping through the cracks of a storm. I hesitated before answering. "Morning, Mrs. Hayes." She looked over her shoulder, then back at me. "Haven't seen you around much." "Everything all right?" I opened my mouth, but the words stuck. My hands tightened around the broom handle. I forced a smile. "Just busy, that's all." Her eyes narrowed slightly. She didn't believe me, but she didn't press. "If you ever need anything, I'm right here," she said. She pointed to the wooden fence between our yards. 3 knocks. That's all it takes. I'll hear it." Before I could reply, the sound of Dylan's truck growled from down the road. Panic shot through me. "Go inside," I whispered. She nodded once, turning away, just as his headlights swept across the yard. He parked, slamming the door harder than necessary. "What are you doing out here?" he asked. "Just sweeping," I said. "You don't sweep?" he replied, squinting at me. "You're terrible at it." He smirked, but there was something sharp behind his grin. He looked over the fence, eyes narrowing. "Talking to the old lady again?" "She just said hi," I said quickly. "Nothing else." "Stay away from her," he warned. "She asks too many questions." I nodded, pretending to agree, but in that moment I realized how much he feared witnesses. That night I couldn't sleep. The walls creaked, the wind brushed the windows, and the house felt like a living thing holding its breath. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, typing, quietly, fingers trembling. Neighbor saw me. Offered help. Maybe real this time. I saved the entry and hid the laptop back in the vent. The next day, I waited until he left again. I walked to the kitchen window and looked toward Mrs. Hayes's yard. She was sitting on her porch with a book, pretending not to look my way. I took a chance. I walked to the back fence, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. My pulse hammered in my ears. When I reached the fence, I knocked 3 times. Nothing happened. For a moment, I thought she hadn't heard. Then, the curtain inside her kitchen shifted. A few seconds later, her voice came from the other side, soft and steady. "You okay, honey?" "Not really," I whispered. My throat tightened. "He watches everything." "I know," she said. "I see him. You're not invisible, sweetheart." I bit my lip, fighting tears. "He's got cameras. Locks the doors. I can't leave." "Then we'll find another way," she said. "Does your mama know?" "She's scared of him too?" I said. "She won't go." There was a pause. "All right," she said finally. "You don't rush this. You plan. You gather proof, and when the time's right, we call for help." "He's a former cop," I said quickly. "He knows people." Then we make sure they can't protect him, she said firmly. You hear me? You're not alone. I pressed my forehead against the fence, breathing hard. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet, she said. Just promise me something. Don't do anything that'll get you hurt. I promise, I said, though I wasn't sure I could keep it. Good girl, she said. Now go inside before he comes back. I did. My hands were shaking as I closed the back door. When Dylan returned later, he was calmer, humming to himself as he cooked dinner. But that calmness was worse than rage. It meant he'd convinced himself everything was under control again. During dinner, I tried not to look at Mom. She barely touched her food. Her eyes darted toward the window, once catching the faint light from Mrs. Hayes's porch. I realized then that she knew. She'd seen. Later that night, I was lying in bed when I heard a soft knock at my door. Claire Mom's whisper. I opened it. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. He's asleep, she said. I heard you outside earlier. With Eleanor. Mrs. Hayes, I said quietly. She wants to help. You can't trust anyone, Mom said quickly. If he finds out. She's not like that, I said. She believes me. Mom covered her face with her hands. He'll know. He always knows. Then, let him, I said, surprising myself. He can't control everything. She looked at me, her fear mixing with something else, hope maybe, or guilt. You sound like your father, she said. He used to say things like that? I smiled faintly. Maybe it's time someone did again. She didn't answer. She just reached out and took my hand, squeezing it tight. Be careful, she whispered. He hears everything. The next morning, Dylan left early. I checked the cameras when he was gone, following the wires until I found the recorder hidden in a drawer. I didn't dare touch it, but I memorized where it was. I started recording with my smartwatch instead, small, discreet, easy to hide. Every time he yelled, every time he slammed a door or grabbed Mom's arm, I pressed the button. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew I needed proof. A few nights later, I saw Mrs. Hayes again through the window. She didn't wave this time. She just gave a small nod as if to say she understood that she was still there. For the first time in months, I didn't feel completely trapped. There was someone who knew, someone watching from the other side of the fence. I lay in bed that night, listening to the rain tapping against the roof, imagining the sound of 3 soft knocks echoing through the dark. The house was still a cage, but now there was a crack in the bars. And through that crack, the first breath of freedom had begun to slip in. The night the smartwatch broke began like any other. The air inside the house felt thick, heavy with humidity and tension. Dylan was in the living room watching the news. The sound turned up too loud, the glow of the television flashing across his face in quick blue bursts. Mom sat on the edge of the couch, knitting without looking at what her hands were doing. The yarn tangled between her fingers. I was in the kitchen cleaning dishes that were already clean, just to keep busy. Every movement was calculated, every sound measured. One wrong noise could set him off. When I turned to dry a plate, I caught my reflection in the window, eyes hollow, a bruise fading along my jaw. I barely recognized myself. The smartwatch on my wrist vibrated slightly as it recorded. I'd gotten used to the soft hum it made, the tiny light flickering every few minutes. It was my secret weapon, my only defense. But secrets never last long in that house. Claire Dillon called from the living room. Come here. My stomach twisted. I wiped my hands and walked in slowly. He was holding my phone in one hand, scrolling through the messages. Why's your boss texting you at night? It's about work, I said carefully. Deadlines. Deadlines, he repeated with a smirk. You think I'm stupid? No, I said softly. Then stop lying. He stood and took a step closer. You don't need to talk to anyone when you're here. You're with family. That should be enough. It's just work, Dylan. I said that's enough, he shouted, and Mom flinched so hard the yarn dropped from her hands. Dylan, she whispered. Please, she didn't mean quiet. He barked, his voice slicing through the room. He turned to me again. Give me your watch. My breath caught. Why? You're always tapping it, checking it. What are you hiding? Nothing, I said, taking a small step back. It's just a watch. He moved faster than I expected. In 2 strides, he grabbed my wrist, twisting it sharply. Pain shot up my arm. "Dylan, stop! You're hurting her!" Mom cried, trying to pull him back. He shoved her away with his other hand. "She's lying!" he shouted. The watch slipped off, clattering to the floor. He picked it up, glaring at the small, glowing screen. The recording light blinked red. "What's this?" he asked, his voice low now, dangerous. I froze. "It's just fitness tracking." He stared at it for a moment, then brought it down hard against the edge of the table. The screen cracked. He hit it again and again until pieces flew across the floor. The sound of it breaking felt like bones snapping. "You think you can spy on me?" he shouted. "You think you can make me look like the bad guy I backed up until my shoulders hit the wall?" "I wasn't." "You were," he screamed. His face was red, his veins pulsing. "You want to destroy this family. You've been doing it since the day you left." "Stop it!" Mom begged, stepping between us. "She's your sister." "She's a liar," he shouted, and for a moment I thought he'd hit her too. But he didn't. He turned instead and kicked the broken watch across the floor. Then he stormed out, slamming the door so hard, the picture frames on the wall rattled. The silence that followed was unbearable. I sank to the floor, shaking. Mom knelt beside me, her face, pale tears streaming down. "Are you okay?" she asked, reaching for my arm. "No," I said, my voice cracking. "He found it. He knows." She covered her mouth, eyes wide. "Oh, God." "We have to leave," I said. "Tonight." "We can't," she whispered. "He'll come after us. He'll kill us if we stay." She shook her head violently. "If we go now, he'll find us before we make it out of town. He always does. You don't understand what he's capable of." Then what I asked, desperate. "We just wait until he kills one of us." She looked away, trembling. "He won't. Not if we're careful." "Careful," I said bitterly. "You mean silent?" "Yes," she said quietly. "Silent." I stood pacing the room. My mind raced through plans, where to go, who to call, but every option ended the same way, with Dylan finding us. I looked down at the shards of glass from the watch scattered across the floor. My proof was gone. Everything I'd recorded was lost. I sank back into the chair, burying my face in my hands. Mom sat beside me and whispered, "I'll find another way to help you." "You can't help me if you won't help yourself," I said. She didn't answer. That night, Dylan didn't come home. We stayed awake in silence, waiting for his truck. The hours stretched, each one longer than the last. Sometime after 2 in the morning, Mom stood and walked to my room. She closed the door behind her and spoke in a trembling voice. "If you ever get the chance to run, don't look back. Do you understand?" "Come with me," I said immediately. "We can leave together." She shook her head, tears streaking her face. "He'll find us both if we go, but if it's just you, you might make it." "I won't leave you," I said firmly. "You're all I have left." "No," she whispered. "You still have your life." "I gave up mine a long time ago." I took her hands, cold and shaking. "Mom, please. We can do this together." "You don't know him like I do," she said, her voice barely audible. "He doesn't stop. He'll hunt. He'll wait. He'll wear that smile and talk his way out of anything. Then we'll hide better," I said. "We'll go to the police." "They won't help," she said. "He knows the system. He used to be one of them." She brushed my cheek with trembling fingers. "Please, Claire, promise me. If you see your chance, run." I wanted to argue, to tell her that we could survive this together, but I saw something in her eyes that silenced me: resignation, the kind that comes from years of fear. I realized she wasn't choosing him. She was choosing me. Later, after she left the room, I sat in the dark and cried until my body ached. I thought about the sound of the watch breaking the red light, dying out, the last proof of what was happening, vanishing with it. I thought about Mrs. Hayes, about her steady voice on the other side of the fence, and wondered if she'd hear me if I knocked again. I thought about Mom's note, the one that said, "Don't look back." It all felt like pieces of a life I was losing one by one. When dawn finally came, I made a decision. I was done waiting. I was done being careful. I would get out no matter what it cost. I didn't know that the cost would be blood. It started with the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I had been sitting on the edge of my bed fully dressed, waiting for the morning light. Though dawn had not yet broken, my bag was packed under the bed, my laptop hidden inside. I had decided that tonight would be my last night in that house. I didn't care where I went. I didn't care if I had to run barefoot down the street. I was leaving. The doorknob turned before I could react. Dylan stepped into my room, the faint smell of whiskey clinging to him like another layer of skin. He wasn't yelling this time. That was worse. His quiet moods were the ones that scared me most. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, voice calm, casual. I said nothing. He stepped closer, his eyes scanning the room. "You've been acting strange lately," he said, whispering with Mom, wandering around at night. "You think I don't notice?" "You notice everything," I said softly. He smirked. "That's right, I always do." His gaze landed on the corner of the bed, the slightest bulge where my bag was hidden. "What's that?" "Clothes," I said quickly. "Just laundry." "Laundry," he repeated, crouching down. His hand reached under the bed before I could stop him. He pulled out the bag, unzipped it, and found the laptop. His face changed instantly. "What's this?" "It's mine," I said, stepping forward. "Give it back." He stood holding it like evidence. "You've been recording me again, haven't you?" "No," I lied, too fast. He slammed the bag onto the desk, the laptop clattering onto the floor. "You think you can trick me? Make me look like some kind of monster? You don't need my help for that," I said before I could stop myself. His hand moved before my mind registered it. The slap sent me reeling sideways, my cheek exploding with heat. "Don't talk to me like that," he hissed. I stumbled, catching myself on the dresser. "You don't own me," I said, breath shaking. "I'm not your prisoner." His eyes narrowed. "You think you can run?" "Yes." It came out more as a breath than a word. "You can't," he said. "You'll never make it. I will." The silence that followed was razor sharp. Then he lunged. I ducked, grabbing the edge of the desk and pulling it toward him. Papers scattered. The lamp crashed to the floor. He grabbed my arm, twisting it behind my back. I screamed, the pain shooting up to my shoulder. "Stop fighting me," he shouted. "I'm trying to fix this." "You're breaking me," I cried. The sound of our struggle filled the small room, furniture scraping glass, shattering my breath coming in ragged gasps. He shoved me against the wall, the impact knocking the air from my lungs. My vision flickered. "You don't understand," he said, his voice wild. "I'm all you have. I keep this family together. You're tearing it apart," I said, choking on the words. He slammed his fist into the wall beside my head, the plaster cracking. "I should have done this a long time ago," he muttered. "Put an end to your lies." I saw something glint in his hand, a piece of the broken lamp, jagged and sharp. My body moved on instinct. I kicked his knee hard, and he stumbled, the shard flying from his grip. I tried to run, but he caught my hair, yanking me backward. I hit the floor hard, the breath knocked out of me. He was on me in seconds, his weight crushing my chest. "You made me do this," he growled, his hand closing around my throat. I clawed at his wrist, my nails scraping skin. Spots danced in front of my eyes. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears like a drum. My vision tunneled colors melting into gray. Somewhere distant, I heard a voice. Mom's voice. "Dylan, please stop." Her footsteps pounded down the hallway, but he didn't stop. He didn't even look at her. "You're killing her," she screamed. "You're killing your sister." Her words barely registered. His face hovered above mine, red, distorted, almost unrecognizable. The room blurred. I reached out blindly, my fingers brushing the cold surface of the laptop on the floor. I pressed the power key, praying it would record something, anything. His grip tightened. The world began to fade. Then suddenly, a sound split the moment, the crash of something heavy. Mom had thrown herself at him, grabbing his arm. "Let her go!" she screamed. He shoved her off, and she hit the dresser, her head striking the edge before she fell to the floor. "Mom!" I tried to shout, but it came out as a broken gasp. Dylan looked at her, breathing hard, as if seeing her for the first time. Look what you made me do, he said, voice trembling. He turned back to me, his hands trembling now, his expression flickering between rage and confusion. You shouldn't have pushed me. I didn't, I whispered. You did this. His hand went to his head, gripping his hair. For a moment, he looked lost. Then, something shifted again darker. He grabbed me by the arm and dragged me toward the hallway. My legs scraped the floor, my head spinning. You're not leaving, he muttered. You're staying right here until you understand. I kicked, fought, screamed, but my voice was weak. He dragged me past Mom's motionless body, her hair spread across the floor like a shadow. I reached out to her, my fingers grazing her sleeve. Mom, I whispered, but she didn't move. He yanked me harder. We reached the living room. He threw me down the side of my head, hitting the base of the couch. Pain exploded. I tried to crawl away, but he was faster. He pinned me again, his knee on my chest. You don't get to leave, he said. You don't get to ruin me. I stared up at him, barely breathing. You already ruined yourself. His face twisted. His hand came down again, and then nothing. No sound, no light, just a sudden, infinite silence. The last thing I saw before everything went white was my mother's face at the edge of the hallway. Her eyes were open now, wide and terrified. She screamed my name, her voice echoing through the house, trapped somewhere between fear and love. Then, everything disappeared. When I woke up, the world was all white and humming. The ceiling above me buzzed with fluorescent light, the kind that made everything feel sterile and unreal. My throat burned. My ribs ached. Every breath felt like dragging air through broken glass. For a few seconds, I couldn't remember where I was or how I got there. Then the monitor beside me beeped faster, and memory came crashing back. The struggle, the floor, my mother's scream, Dylan's hands. I jerked upright, gasping, but pain shot through my chest and I fell back against the pillow. Easy, sweetheart, a voice said gently. A nurse leaned over me, her eyes kind but searching. You're safe. You're in St. David's Hospital. You've been here since last night. My mother, I croaked. She's here, the nurse said, glancing toward the chair in the corner. I turned my head slowly. Mom was sitting there, her posture straight but trembling. Her hands were clasped together in her lap so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her eyes were red, her lips pale. Hi, baby, she whispered. I wanted to ask if she was okay if Dylan was gone, if the police were involved, but my throat was too dry. The nurse adjusted my IV and checked the monitor. Doctor will be in soon, she said softly. Then lowering her voice, she added, The police have a few questions too. Her gaze flicked briefly toward my mother, and something unspoken passed between them. When she left, silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Mom stood and approached the bed. Her hands hovered over mine but didn't touch. You scared me, she said weakly. I thought. She stopped, swallowing hard. You were on the floor, not moving. My voice came out a rasp. Where is he? She hesitated. He's not here. Not here. I repeated, my pulse spiking. Mom, what does that mean? He's at home, she whispered. My stomach dropped. He's what? They asked questions, but I told them you fell, she said quickly. That it was an accident, that you hit your head on the table. I stared at her disbelief, curdling into anger. You what? He'll kill us if he knows we told anyone, she said, her voice trembling. He said he'd burn the house down next time. He already almost did, I said through gritted teeth. He could have killed us both. Tears welled in her eyes. You don't understand, Claire. If he goes to prison, he'll find a way out. People like him always do. And when he does, we won't survive it. I looked away, my chest tightening. So we just keep pretending. Please, she whispered. Don't make them ask again. Please don't. The door opened and Dr. Price walked in. She was in her 40s, dark curls pinned back neatly, eyes sharp behind her glasses. Claire. Glad you're awake, she said. Her tone was professional but gentle. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, I said, trying to sit up. She smiled faintly. Not far off. You have 2 cracked ribs, mild concussion, and bruising consistent with, well, a significant impact. She paused, studying my face. Do you remember what happened? I hesitated. My mother's fingers brushed my wrist under the blanket, a silent plea. I felt her nails dig slightly into my skin. I looked at the doctor, then at the window, then back at the ceiling. I fell, I said quietly. Dr. Price didn't write anything. She just stared at me for a moment, as if deciding how far to push. All right, she said finally. Accidents happen. She turned to my mother. We'll run some additional tests. Keep her overnight. When she left, Mom exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for an hour. Thank you, she whispered. You don't thank me for this, I said, my voice shaking. You thank me when we're free. She looked at me, and I saw it again, the fear so deep it had replaced logic, replaced hope. It was survival raw and paralyzing. Later that afternoon, Dr. Price came back alone. She closed the door behind her and pulled up a chair. Claire, she said quietly, I've seen injuries like this before. You and I both know you didn't fall. I didn't answer. She glanced at the chart, then back at me. If someone hurt you, we can protect you. We have resources, safe houses, legal aid. My throat tightened. He's my brother, I said softly. And she's my mother. Then they should protect you, not harm you. You don't understand, I whispered. He won't stop. Then let us stop him, she said firmly. You have rights, Claire. You don't have to go back there. I stared at my hands. The IV tube pulsed faintly under my skin. If I tell you something I said slowly, you'll keep it between us, as much as I can, yes. I looked toward the door, then back at her. Check my laptop, I said. What's on it? Proof. The word hung in the air. Dr. Price nodded once, her expression changing. Where is it now? At the house, I said. Under my desk. All right, she said, standing. I'll make a call. When she left, my mother came back in. What did you say to her? She demanded in a hushed tone. Nothing, I lied. You're lying, she said. I can tell. Maybe I learned from you, I snapped. Her face crumpled. I'm trying to protect you. By protecting him, I asked. By keeping everything buried, she covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. You don't understand what it's like to live with that kind of fear. Yes, I do, I said. Every day since he first hit me. She didn't respond. She just sat down, defeated. Hours passed. The room dimmed as the sun went down. The sound of the monitor was the only thing keeping me grounded. Then near midnight there was a soft knock on the door. Dr. Price entered again, her face serious. Claire, she said we contacted the authorities. Your neighbor, Mrs. Hayes, called them too. She's been worried about you for weeks. My chest tightened. Eleanor. Yes, she said. She came forward with some recordings she made screaming crashes the night you were brought in. She said she heard 3 knocks on her fence. My breath caught. Did they find the laptop? They did, she said. And Claire, it's all there. The audio, the threats, everything. I felt tears rise hot and uncontrollable. He's going to prison, isn't he? He's in custody now, she said. And you're safe here. The words didn't feel real yet. Safe. I'd heard that word so many times, but this was the first time it didn't sound like a lie. I looked at my mother. Her face had gone pale. She covered her mouth as the truth settled in. What did you do? She whispered, horror in her voice. What I had to, I said quietly. What you couldn't. She turned away, shoulders trembling. Dr. Price placed a hand on my shoulder. Rest now. You did the right thing. When she left, Mom stood in the corner for a long time silent. Finally, she whispered, He'll never forgive us. I looked at her, my voice steady for the first time in years. I don't need his forgiveness. I just need my life back. She sank into the chair, sobbing quietly. I turned my face toward the window. The night outside was calm, the city lights flickering like distant stars. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of morning. The first time I saw Dylan again was in court. The air inside the Travis County courthouse was heavy with whispers and the faint rustle of paper. I sat at the witness stand, my hands clasped tightly together, palms slick with sweat. Across the room, Dylan sat in the defendant's chair, his wrists cuffed, his orange jumpsuit stark against the gray of the courtroom. His beard had been trimmed, his hair shorter, but his eyes were the same cold, calculating, furious. He didn't look away from me, not once. The prosecutor stood beside me, reading from a sheet of paper, her voice calm but steady. The evidence presented includes multiple audio recordings of verbal and physical abuse, corroborated by testimony from the defendant's mother, Eleanor Hayes, and Dr. Emily Price. I closed my eyes briefly when she said Eleanor's name. Mrs. Hayes sat in the back row, her white hair neatly brushed, her hands folded in her lap. When our eyes met, she nodded, reassuring me that I wasn't alone. My mother wasn't there. She hadn't been able to come. The doctor said her mental state was too fragile, that she was still undergoing treatment for trauma-induced breakdown. Part of me was relieved she wasn't there to see this. The other part wished she had been so she could finally see what fear had made us all become. When it was my turn to speak, the room seemed to shrink. Every eye was on me. The defense attorney asked Miss Benton, "Is it true that you chose not to report your brother's behavior for months prior to this incident?" "Yes," I said. My voice came out steady, but my chest was tight. "Why?" "Because I was afraid," I said simply. "He controlled everything, our home, our money, even our movements. My mother and I lived like prisoners." The attorney tilted his head. "Prisoners, yet you stayed." I looked at him. "People stay in cages all the time when they've been convinced there's no way out." He opened his mouth again, but the prosecutor objected, asked and answered. The judge nodded. "Sustained." I looked toward Dylan again. He leaned forward, whispering something to his lawyer, a smirk twitching at the corner of his mouth. I'd seen that smirk 100 times, the one that always meant, "You'll regret this later." Only this time, there was no later. Dr. Price testified next. She presented the medical records photos of my injuries and the recorded files from the recovered laptop. The sound of Dylan's voice filled the courtroom, shouting crashing threats. My mother's voice crying. My own pleading. The courtroom was silent except for the playback. One of the jurors turned away. Another wiped at her eyes. When the recording ended, Dr. Price looked toward me briefly before stepping down. Her eyes said what words couldn't. "It's over." Mrs. Hayes went next. I heard 3 knocks that night, she said, her voice soft but clear. We had agreed that if she ever needed help, that was the signal. I called 911. By the time they arrived, the paramedics were already there. "And what did you witness before that night?" the prosecutor asked. "I heard things," she said, looking down at her hands. "Screaming, breaking. I tried to talk to the mother, but she was terrified. You could see it in her eyes. They both were." The defense tried to discredit her, saying she was a nosy neighbor, but the recordings spoke louder than any cross-examination could. When it came time for the verdict, my heartbeat filled my ears. The judge's voice sounded far away when he said, "On the charge of felony domestic assault and unlawful imprisonment, the defendant is found guilty." The gavel struck once sharp and final. Dylan didn't move. He just stared at me, his expression unreadable. As they led him away, he turned his head slightly and said, barely audible, "You'll regret this." I met his gaze and said nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the hospital window where Mom was resting, watching the lights of Austin shimmer in the distance. The world looked calm again, like it had gone back to pretending nothing had happened. But I knew better now. I looked at her asleep in the bed beside me. Her face was pale but peaceful, her hands finally still. When she woke in the morning, she didn't ask about Dylan. She didn't have to. She just whispered, "It's over." "He's in prison," I said softly. 12 years. She exhaled shakily, tears sliding down her temples. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she said. "You didn't make him do what he did," I replied. "He made his own choices." "But I let it happen," she said. I froze every time. I told myself I was protecting him when really I was protecting my fear. "You survived him," I said. "That's enough for now." Later that week, Dr. Price visited Mom's hospital room. She brought paperwork for a rehabilitation program, a place that helped victims of domestic trauma regain independence. "It's quiet there," she said. "You'll both have space to breathe." I watched Mom sign the forms with trembling hands. It felt like closing a door that had been open for too long. A week later, I moved out of the hospital's temporary housing and into Mrs. Hayes's guest room. The first night I slept there, I dreamed of the sound of rain against the window, not fists on doors. In the mornings, I sat with Eleanor on her porch while she sipped tea and told me stories about her nursing days. She said healing isn't loud. It's slow, patient work. Sometimes it's just sitting in the sun long enough to remember what warmth feels like. I started therapy again, writing every day as part of recovery. The court had returned my laptop, and I renamed the file The Sound of Survival. Each entry I wrote was a piece of the truth I'd once hidden. Dr. Price checked in weekly, and every time she said the same thing, "You're doing better than you think." One afternoon, as I walked through the quiet hallways of the rehabilitation center, I saw Mom sitting near the garden watching the fountain. She looked smaller than I remembered, but lighter somehow, like a person who had finally laid down a burden she'd carried too long. I sat beside her. "Do you think he hates us?" she asked. "I don't care," I said. "Hate is just another kind of chain." "I'm done being tied to him." She smiled faintly. "You sound strong." "You sound free," I said. She looked at the sky, the faintest trace of a smile still on her lips. "Maybe we both are." Months passed. Dylan's sentencing became a short headline in the local paper. Few people read it. To the world, it was just another domestic violence case, another tragedy tucked between election coverage and weather reports. But for me, it was everything. Freedom didn't come all at once. It came in small pieces the first time I laughed again, the first time I walked through a store without flinching at loud voices, the first night I slept through without waking from a dream of choking hands. Sometimes guilt still crept in, whispering that I'd destroyed what little family we had left. But then I'd remember the truth. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who helps you breathe. On the day the rehabilitation center held a group session for survivors, I told my story for the first time. My hands shook, but my voice didn't. I ended it by saying, "He taught me to live in fear, but fear didn't save me. Courage did. And courage wasn't loud, it was just me pressing record." The room was quiet for a moment. Then a woman across from me started to clap. The sound grew until it filled the space, not applause for victory, but recognition for all of us who had lived through silence and were learning how to speak again. That night, I wrote one last entry in my file. For the first time, silence doesn't scare me. It feels clean. It feels like truth. Then I closed the laptop and stepped outside. The air smelled like rain again, the same scent as the night it all began, but now it meant something different. It meant renewal. It meant life. I tilted my face up to the sky and let the drops fall. For the first time, I didn't flinch. I just breathed. 6 months after the trial, I stood in front of a small apartment in Dallas with a key that didn't tremble in my hand. It wasn't much, 1-bedroom, 2nd floor, no elevator, but the light came through the windows every morning and the air smelled faintly of jasmine from the courtyard below. I signed the lease without asking for approval, without looking over my shoulder. That alone felt like freedom. Mrs. Hayes helped me move in. She brought a casserole, 2 mugs, and a potted fern. She insisted I couldn't kill no matter what. "A place feels alive when something's growing in it," she said, setting it by the window. "So don't you dare let it die." I smiled. "I'll try not to." She patted my arm. "Try isn't enough. You've survived worse than houseplants." When she left, I stood in the empty room and listened to the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the ceiling fan, the faint sound of traffic outside. Ordinary noises. Safe noises. The kind I hadn't heard in years. That first night, I slept with the window open. The breeze moved through the curtains, cool and soft. I woke before dawn to the sound of birds, and for a moment I didn't know where I was. Then I remembered. I was home. Over the next few weeks, I built a new routine. I worked remotely for a small cybersecurity firm that hired me after hearing my story through a victim outreach program Dr. Price connected me with. I started volunteering at the women's shelter downtown, teaching basic tech safety, how to change passwords, how to erase tracking software, how to protect yourself digitally when the world outside felt unsafe. It felt right, like turning my pain into purpose. Mom entered a residential therapy program near Waco. She wrote letters every Sunday on cream stationery that smelled faintly of lavender. Her handwriting was shaky at first, but her words were clear. I'm learning to breathe again. One letter read, I still see him sometimes in my dreams, but the dreams don't own me anymore. The therapists say that's progress. I replied every week. You did what you thought you had to. I wrote once, fear is a cage, but cages can rust and doors can open. By the third month, she started signing her letters, Love Mom again. One afternoon, I visited her. The rehab center was quiet sunlight spilling across pale blue walls. She was sitting in the garden feeding breadcrumbs to a pair of sparrows. When she saw me, her face lit up like it hadn't in years. You look good, she said, standing to hug me. So do you, I said, meaning it. We walked through the garden paths slow and easy. She told me about her therapy sessions, about the other women she'd met, one who'd survived her husband's violence, another who'd escaped years of manipulation. We sit in a circle and tell our stories, she said. At first, I couldn't talk, but then I realized silence was how we got here in the first place. I nodded. I know that feeling. She smiled faintly. I read your blog, you know. You did. Of course. The sound of silence breaking. Beautiful name. I looked down a little embarrassed. It's just a place to write, to let it out. It's more than that, she said softly. You're giving people a voice. You're giving me one, too. We sat together in silence for a while, listening to the fountain. When I left that day, she hugged me tighter than usual and whispered, You already forgave me, didn't you? A long time ago, I said. You just didn't believe it yet. That night, I wrote another post for the blog. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means letting the story end without letting it define you. It means learning to breathe again. The post went viral. Hundreds of comments poured in from women and men across the country. Some wrote, I'm still there, I haven't escaped yet. Others wrote, I did. And I'm finally healing. I read every message. I replied to as many as I could, ending each with, Drop your city in the comments tonight, you're safe here. Soon there were hundreds of names. Houston, Miami, Des Moines, Tulsa, Portland, a map of quiet courage spreading across the world. Mrs. Hayes printed the comments and taped them to her fridge. Proof you're changing lives, she said, smiling, one heartbeat at a time. In August, I spoke at a survivors conference in Austin, the same city I'd once been too afraid to drive through alone. I stood on stage in a navy blazer, the microphone trembling slightly in my hand, and looked out at a room full of strangers who somehow already understood me. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. I began. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's not about punishment, it's about peace. I told them about fear, about silence, about how survival isn't weakness but strategy, about how courage doesn't look like running into fire. Sometimes it looks like pressing record and waiting for the right moment to speak. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then someone began to clap. Soon, the whole room joined in, not loud or triumphant, but steady like rain on a roof. Afterward, a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. I left last month, she said. Your story helped me do it? I hugged her. You did that, I said. You pressed record. I drove home that night under a sky full of stars, windows down the wind, cool against my face. I thought about Dylan. He'd written once from prison a short letter, messy handwriting. You ruined my life. But maybe I deserved it. I don't know anymore. I never responded. Some stories don't need a sequel. Others are better left unfinished. I kept the letter in a drawer not out of sentiment, but as proof that even monsters are still human and that being human isn't an excuse. A few months later, Mrs. Hayes passed away quietly in her sleep. At her memorial, they played an old recording of her favorite hymn, Abide with Me. I sat in the front row holding a small bouquet of white lilies. The pastor spoke about compassion, about how small acts of kindness can echo louder than any sermon. When it was my turn to speak, I said, She saved my life without ever raising her voice. Sometimes the strongest rescues come through fences, not doors. I took the small gold cross she used to wear and hung it near my window. It catches the morning light perfectly. I still visit her garden once a week, watering her flowers, keeping her promise that something should always keep growing. By winter, Mom was living independently again. She rented a small house near the rehabilitation center with a white porch and a rocking chair she found at a thrift store. We spent Thanksgiving together there, cooking too much food and burning the pie. It was the first holiday that didn't end in fear. We talked about everything Dad did in the years we lost and the years we still had. "Do you think people can really change?" she asked, sipping her coffee. "I think some can," I said, "but not all. The ones who can start by admitting what they broke." She nodded. "Maybe that's what I'm doing." "Then you're already ahead," I said. That night before I left, she handed me a small box. Inside was a silver pendant shaped like a circuit board, a little symbol of my work, something she'd found at a crafts fair. "For your strength," she said, "and for your mind. You always used both." I put it on immediately. "It's beautiful," I said. "It's you," she replied. Strong, smart, still shining. The next morning, I wrote my final entry for the blog that year. Healing isn't linear. Some days you'll feel invincible. Others you'll still flinch at shadows. But every breath you take in peace is a rebellion against what tried to destroy you. It became the most shared post I'd ever written. A publisher reached out to ask if I'd write a book. I said maybe one day. For now, I just wanted to live, to breathe, to exist without apology. As the year ended, I stood on my balcony watching the city lights flicker below. Somewhere out there, other women were whispering their own truths into the dark pressing record, sending proof into the world that silence can be broken. The wind carried their voices to me, or maybe I just imagined it. Either way, it sounded like hope. My phone buzzed with a notification someone had commented on my latest post. "Your story saved me." "Thank you," I typed back. "You saved yourself." Then I set the phone down and turned toward the window where the small cross caught the reflection of city lights scattering them across the room like fragments of a new dawn. The world outside was far from perfect, but inside this tiny apartment, everything felt possible again. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It whispers. And sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one that changes everything. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It whispers. It doesn't always arrive in uniforms or courtrooms. Sometimes it looks like a trembling hand pressing record in the dark, or a neighbor who listens instead of looking away. Sometimes it's just survival, one more breath taken when someone swore you wouldn't make it. I learned that healing isn't the loud moment after the storm. It's the quiet morning after when you realize the world didn't end. When the silence that once terrified you becomes your peace. When you look in the mirror and see not a victim, but the person who walked through hell and kept walking. There were nights I still woke up gasping, hearing echoes of his voice, seeing flashes of that house. But then I'd hear the sound of traffic outside, a siren fading a train in the distance, and I'd remember, I'm not there anymore. Fear can feel permanent, but it's not. It's just noise waiting to fade. If you've ever lived in that kind of silence, the kind where you measure your words, your footsteps, even your breathing, then you know what I mean. You start believing the cage is the whole world until one day a single knock on a fence reminds you it isn't. Mrs. Hayes used to say that courage isn't born in big moments. It's grown in small ones the moment you open the window again, the moment you tell your story, the moment you stop apologizing for surviving. That's what this story is really about. Not violence, not fear, but the decision to stop being quiet. If you're watching this and you've ever been made to feel small, powerless, or invisible, listen to me. You are not broken. You are not to blame. You are not too late. There's a version of you out there who is still waiting to breathe freely again, and she's stronger than you think. I used to think my story ended with the trial with the gavel, the sentence, the relief of hearing guilty. But the truth is, justice isn't the end. Healing is. Justice gives you silence. Healing gives you voice. And voice is what keeps the darkness from coming back. I built my life again, one word at a time, one heartbeat at a time. Every line I wrote on my blog was another brick in the wall between me and who I used to be. Some nights I'd scroll through the comments, hundreds of them from women, men, teenagers, even veterans who said they saw themselves in my story. Some were still trapped whispering from the same kind of cage I once lived in. Others had already escaped but didn't know how to forgive themselves for not leaving sooner. I told them what I'll tell you now: there is no too late. The moment you realize you deserve peace, that's the moment the cage starts to crack. And when it breaks, it doesn't matter how long it took. You made it out. That's all that matters. So if you're watching this from a dark room, if you're keeping your phone hidden under your pillow, if you're afraid of the sound of footsteps in the hall, please remember this: you are not alone. Someone is always listening. There's always a Mrs. Hayes somewhere waiting to hear your 3 knocks. There's always a stranger, a nurse, a friend, a voice that will believe you. And if you can't find them yet, then hear mine. I believe you. I see you. You can start over. And maybe your story won't look like mine. Maybe it won't end in courtrooms or hospitals or confessions. Maybe it'll just end in peace. But that's enough. That's more than enough. Because peace after years of chaos is its own kind of justice. When you rebuild, don't rebuild who you were before the pain. Build someone new, someone wiser, someone free, someone who doesn't apologize for surviving. You deserve that. You deserve to wake up to quiet mornings and coffee that doesn't taste like fear. You deserve to walk into sunlight without flinching. You deserve laughter that doesn't echo off the walls like warning bells. You deserve a life where love doesn't hurt. And if no one ever told you that before, let me be the first. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be loved without condition. You deserve to exist without fear. Sometimes I still think about the night it all ended, the sound of glass breaking the cold floor beneath me, my mother's scream. For a long time, I thought that was the moment my story closed. But I see now it was the moment it began, because from that silence I built a voice. From that fear, I built a purpose. And from that pain, I built a life that finally feels like mine. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening, for feeling, for remembering that stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're reminders that survival is real, that courage lives in ordinary people. Drop your city in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, because tonight, wherever you are part of something bigger. You are proof that silence can be broken. You are proof that fear doesn't get the final word. If you've ever had to choose between blood and truth, tell me, which would you choose? Because every truth, no matter how quiet, deserves to be heard. Subscribe, share this story, and remember, you're safe here tonight and always.